The Queen marks 70 years on the throne with a nod to the past and a wish for the future.
She is the first British monarch to celebrate a Platinum Jubilee. What a celebration it will be.
The bunting's going up in streets across the country as final preparations are made ahead of 4 days of celebrations.
A 4-day celebration of Britain's greatest ever monarch and her 70 glorious years on the throne. I'm genuinely excited about this.
As you've probably heard by now, the Queen has been on the throne for 70 years. And today, most of us are enjoying a special bank holiday. But what exactly are we celebrating? Is it the fact that a particular woman by accident of birth has been imprisoned in a cancerous institution for all her adult life? The fact that we live in a country where this unqualified, unelected, unchosen person is head of the state, head of the military, and head of the church? Or the fact that for 70 years it's been taboo to suggest Elizabeth Windsor might not deserve her powerful role and her immense wealth? Because far from being a quaint oddity or a mere tourist attraction, there's a strong case that the existence of a monarch and a royal family is the most toxic feature of our country. It gives rise to a perverse notion of class that warps our whole society. It feeds nationalism and poisonous nostalgia for a past that never was. And yes, it costs an absolute fortune. In short, it's not normal. But the myth of a benevolent, honourable, hereditary monarchy has continued to prevail, and indeed, as our Queen has aged, even strengthened. Which is perhaps surprising, given in the last couple of years we have witnessed this.
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
Now, still not. And the reason being is that the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful.
And we've heard allegations such as this.
You certainly must have had some conversations with Harry about it and have your own suspicions as to why they didn't want to make Archie a prince.
So we had in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title, and also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
Yet a consensus remains that this is the family which, by accident of birth, should continue to rule over us all. Yes, as we fork out millions to pay for Jubilee revelry amid a cost of living crisis, and with revelations the Queen is likely to help with the legal fees of her favourite Epstein-adjacent son, according to YouGov, a full 60% of Britons remain in favour of keeping the monarchy. A mere 27% think we should move on from having an unelected head of state. And this poses a crucial question. What sorcery is responsible for this? Well, one possible answer is that for more than 70 years we've been force-fed propaganda to help keep this abhorrent structure in place. It's propaganda, sometimes subtle, sometimes explicit, that tries to make the monarchy look normal, natural even. And in this Platinum Jubilee, we'll take you through almost a century of it. Let's start in the 1940s with this newsreel from the Second World War.
For Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret Rose, it's the day for an expedition, and incidentally the occasion for the first film made of them since the war started. Princess Elizabeth certainly is growing up. That'll be everybody's comment, whether expressed or not. And it's a pleasant further thought that the young heiress to the throne is able to enjoy the pleasures of childhood as detached as possible from the war.
Like many children, Elizabeth and her sister were sent to the countryside while her parents stayed in London. This was portrayed as the royal family enduring just what the rest of the population were going through. And in 1940, the 14-year-old princess gave this address from her home in Windsor Castle.
Her Royal Highness, Princess Elizabeth.
In wishing you all good evening, I feel that I am speaking to friends and companions who have shared with my sister and myself many a happy children's hour. Thousands of you in this country have had to leave your homes and be separated from your fathers and mothers. My sister Margaret Rose and I feel so much for you, as we know from experience what it means to be away from those we love most of all.
On the face of it, It's a touching message, yet listeners were supposed to ignore the fact that the princesses were living in a castle, not with total strangers like so many British children, and ignore the fact that they had a staff taking care of them, and that, unlike many of the children Elizabeth spoke to, there was no real risk that they would be orphaned. Later in the war, a teenage Elizabeth was portrayed as just one of the thousands of young women who volunteered to help the war effort at home.
At an MT training centre, Princess Elizabeth, now a second subaltern in the ATS, has been on a 3-week course of instruction. Like most army courses, this included some theory. A second subaltern in the ATS wouldn't normally drive a lorry or truck, but she must be able to do anything which she will require her drivers to do. The princess, who was on the eve of her 19th birthday when these pictures were taken, is at the wheel of a 1,500-weight truck in convoy. Although she drives it with apparent composure, she had no experience of driving before she commenced her training.
In fact, all she did was that training course, and she was driven home to Windsor Castle every night and taken to the officers' mess for meals. After the war, several things changed both in Britain and across the globe, and that resulted in a period of huge instability for the monarchy. The post-war period saw the growth of powerful movements for independence in Britain's colonies. The Crown's imperial subjects had paid an enormous human cost during the war, and they were in no mood to now be used to fund Britain's recovery. The powers that be were also just as threatened by communism and its promise of a classless society. For many in the 1940s, the Soviet working class were the heroic anti-fascists of the war, and British workers returning from battle and hardship were determined not to return to their pre-war condition of mass exploitation. At the same time, dynastic monarchies had been collapsing across Europe. After the First World War, the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman monarchies were no more. By the end of World War II, Italy, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary had joined the list of republics. And British society itself had undergone important socialist transformations. The post-war Labour government built the NHS and created the welfare state. The Bank of England, railways, coal mining, and heavy industry were all brought into state control. But in 1951, the Tories, under Churchill, returned to power. And while the post-war consensus meant they kept much of the new welfare state, the Tories feared a drift away from the structures that had traditionally shaped British society. And when George VI died in February 1952 and the young Princess Elizabeth became Queen, it presented an opportunity to reassert those structures. And the growing medium of television provided the means. In 1953, the year of the Queen's coronation, only 14% of the British population owned a TV. Yet, gathering with friends and neighbours, more than half the population watched the televised event. The BBC broadcast a marathon 8-hour package, with the pomp and splendour of the event ramped up to maximum effect. RAF bombers flew film reels across the Atlantic, ensuring that American and Canadian audiences could get in on the act too. And the whole thing cost £1.57 million. In today's money, that would be around 45 million. Just small change for a declining empire trying to reassert itself on the international stage and to reimpose traditional values on a society tempted by socialism. But what fed that enormous appetite, and why did this extravagant event provoke celebration, not outrage, for those taxpayers who could little afford it? Well, I'm sure nationalism played a role. The splendour of the coronation was the splendour of Britain, and people like to see their country doing well. But there had also been a great deal of preparation made to ensure that the Queen was welcomed into her fortunate role with sympathy as opposed to resentment. In the 16 months between her father's death and the coronation, newsreels like this were played endlessly in cinemas across the country.
The tragic news reached Princess Elizabeth and her husband while in Kenya, and the new Queen left immediately for London, where her uncle, the Duke of Gloucester, and Earl Mountbatten, uncle of the Duke of Edinburgh, were waiting to welcome the girl who left as a royal ambassador and returned as a queen. So, Queen Elizabeth II drove to Clarence House. And along the route, they stood in silence, her people, sharing with her the loss of the head of the family.
Note the narrative. Someone who left a girl returns a queen. She and we are mourning the head of our family. The stirring but muted national anthem in the background, even in the footage of her car driving into London, the Undertaker's funeral sign that hangs above the road, all carefully put together to evoke the sense that we're witnessing destiny, both hers and ours, in action. Of course, the death of a parent should inspire sympathy. It's whether it justifies a £45 million coronation, which is the apt question. And of course, it's also the case that for any one person, a parent can only die twice, and so more creative methods would need to be employed so that the Queen's subjects would continue to empathise with her. Perhaps the clunkiest example here was a 90-minute fly-on-the-wall documentary called Royal Family. 3/4 of the British public watched it when it first aired in 1969, and it was broadcast repeatedly. The film is an hour and a half of total awkwardness as Britain's most privileged family cosplay as ordinary, like at this totally normal family picnic.
This edges up and small a bit.
Yeah, I don't. We'll leave it.
There she is.
What's that stuff?
Cream.
Did you put cream in it?
Later.
Come on. Right, Mummy, what do you mean? What's this for? What's this for?
Well, it's for helping things, turning things over and doing that.
Meeting in the mirror. Not for you to
Well,
do.
it's difficult, yes. You've got a better device.
Where?
Right. Do have that one.
What's the spoon for? What's the spoon for?
Well, it's not much use for anything here today.
What's the spoon for?
My favourite bit is the young Prince Edward who's never seen a spatula before. What's this for? What's this for? Or Charles, a man who has a servant iron his shoelaces and squeeze his toothpaste onto his toothbrush, pretending to make a salad dressing. Even the Queen could see that there was nothing convincing about their act, the Telegraph reports. It was a bold move designed to revive public interest in the royal family, ushering them into the modern age by showing them as ordinary people. But it turned out that seeing Prince Charles chopping lettuce and making salad dressing for a family barbecue, while the Duke of Edinburgh struggled to brown the sausages, also destroyed their mystique. In 1972, the Queen ordered the BBC's infamous fly-on-the-wall documentary to be locked away, and it has never been seen in full since. Until last year, that is, when someone uploaded it to YouTube, where you can still watch it if you enjoy a very specific form of masochism. And if you're into pain, another bonkers foray into the mainstream would take place in 1987. Edward, the youngest of the Queen's children, wanted to forge a career in TV. He came up with the idea of It's a Royal Knockout, featuring himself, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Sarah Ferguson as team captains. And the BBC obligingly aired it.
We are excellent, fighting fit, raring to go, and we have the most amazing mascot, which nobody else has got, called a panda, to support us on our way.
Now, what are the ace cards that you're holding, Mum?
Well, we don't have any cards because basically we're the best. We're the best blue bandits there are. Okay?
Give me an L. L. Give me a U. U. Give me an E. E. What do you got?
Big Bad Blue Bandit! Meat Loaf and Pam Stevenson. The undoubted favourites to win the tournament, His Royal Highness the Prince Edward, sir.
Oh, favourites, are we? Ah, well, that's because we've got a pretty good team.
What are your tactics?
Oh, very cool, calm, collected.
All this quasi-excitement doesn't really matter a damn to you, then?
No, we're the strong, silent types.
The strong, silent types. Is that going to describe your tactics, strong and silent on the games, or will it be excitement like Lucy eventually?
No, not until later, when we've won.
The less said about that, the better. As we showed earlier, royal propaganda can't always be about ordinariness. If the royals were just normal people like you or me, we might question why they're entitled to so much. Addressing this contradiction was the social scientist Michael Billig. After conducting interviews with 63 British families, he described the role played by portrayals of the royals as one of ideological settlement. Billig explained that the monarch and the royals present us with a dilemma. On the one hand, we feel a powerful tie to history and perhaps a fear of a different future. On the other, we know that their existence goes against all the usual conceptions of what is fair or just. And it's faced with this inescapable tension that the function of royal propaganda is to settle us, to calm us down, to give us a story that puts these parts at peace. It requires the movements and motions of ordinary life, but the moments that we all share, love, death, children, are also overlaid with extraordinary and mythical import. It's ideology at its purest, and it keeps at bay our dangerous but justified class-based resentment at the extraordinary wealth, power, and undemocratic privilege of the institution. A key concept which combines both relatability and destiny is that of duty. We saw this before when we looked at the coronation, but take a look at this clip of the older Queen.
I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young, and so it was all a very sudden kind of taking on and making the best job you can. It's a question of maturing into something that one's got used to doing and accepting the fact that here you are and it's your fate, because I think continuity is very important. It is a job for life. Most people have a job and then they go home. And in this existence, the job and the life go on together because you can't really divide it up. The boxes and the communications just keep on coming. And of course, with modern communications, they come even quicker.
The message from that clip is fairly clear. You may not have chosen to have Elizabeth as your queen, to fund her lavish lifestyle, or to grant her a role in the making of laws. But neither did she. The Queen fulfills her duty to live the life of a monarch. We fulfill ours as subjects. And while we might be poorer, being immensely privileged and having inherited power also comes at a considerable cost. It's a message which anyone with a Netflix account might now be familiar with.
Don't you get sick of it all? And lonely?
I do. Which is why it's so important to have the right person by your side. You understand, the titles, they're not the job. She is the job. Loving her, protecting her. She is the essence of your duty.
At least when it comes to the Queen, if not always the rest of the family, the Crown does a good job of settlement by portraying psychologically relatable people suffocating under the pressure of unbearable duty. Of course, to the extent it does serve as royal propaganda, the Crown entirely misses the point. The royals are not victims, and their lives have very little in common with ours. They exist on a plane of existence insulated from the hardship of ordinary life. They're flattered and fawned over by servants and stooges and drown in unimaginable wealth. The Queen gets £90 million annually from the sovereign grant. She has a £500 million personal fortune, and the wealth of the monarchy is estimated to be £72 billion. And as they splurge their cash, duty doesn't seem to be front and centre in the royal mind. For example, just this month, this ad appeared. It's for the job of housekeeping assistant at Buckingham Palace. The successful applicant will work a 40-hour week for a salary of just under £20,000, which works out as £7.97 per hour, or £1.53 per hour less than the national minimum wage. Fabulously rich, but when it comes to workers, disgustingly cheap. And the effort that goes into maintaining an image of relatability extends to future monarchs too. William and Kate, for example, are presented as a hard-working, home counties middle-class couple. They made this clip during the pandemic.
The scale and the speed of what's going on in hospitals. Bear in mind also the isolation. A lot of these patients are sadly dying with no family members around them. And I think for the NHS frontline workers, that is very difficult because they are there right next to the bedside, looking after and caring for each and every patient who's in a critical condition.
What we're seeing now is the NHS and the frontline workers doing the most extraordinary job, and that's really come to the forefront in the last a few weeks. And I think it's going to dramatically change how we all value and see our frontline workers. And I think that is one of the main positives, really, I suppose, that you could take from this. They do an extraordinary job. It goes unrecognised daily, and now I think all of us as a nation can really see how hard they work and how vital their work is.
These are people who use exclusive private hospitals when they need medical attention, not the NHS. Their wealth keeps them far removed from the lives of the frontline NHS workers being valorised. Still, the effect of the clip is this: two people just like us saying and thinking the very things we were all saying and thinking. It's class camouflage at its finest. And a final effect of royal propaganda is to disguise Britain's crimes of empire. Their family's wealth is largely built on the backs of slavery and colonialism, which makes the name Commonwealth a little ironic. Here's the Queen on her 21st birthday in 1947.
As I speak to you today from Cape Town, I am 6,000 miles from the country where I was born. But I am certainly not 6,000 miles from home. Everywhere I have travelled, in these lovely lands of South Africa and Rhodesia, my parents, my sister and I have been taken to the heart of their people and made to feel that we are just as much at home here as if we had lived among them all our lives. That is the great privilege belonging to our place in the worldwide Commonwealth, that there are homes ready to welcome us in every continent of the earth. I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone, unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
The great imperial family to which we all belong. In defence of the metaphor, there is one thing that empire and family have in common. You don't get a choice whether you belong to it. But we should look to those former colonies in the Caribbean for inspiration today. One by one, they're throwing off Liz's yoke, rejecting an institution that takes far more than it gives, and which ties them to a history of domination and abuse. During Kate and William's recent disastrous visit to Jamaica, the country's government chose to announce their intention to become a republic. And this ill-fated photo shoot didn't do much to mend the relationship. And Jamaica is not alone. Belize, the Bahamas, Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Kitts and Nevis have all announced plans to ditch the Queen as head of state. And this was all in recent months. And it followed Barbados' decision to become a republic in November last year. Here's Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley on the day Barbados sacked the Queen.
We see this moment this morning as a transitioning of our mental landscape. We have done well as a nation to be able to take care of many of the basic needs of our people. Have we completed the journey? No, we have not. But have we transformed this nation since 1966? Most assuredly, we have. And our ability to continue that journey depends now not on anyone from outside, but depends on us. And one of the most critical aspects of that journey, as I've said over and over, must be the recognition, in the words of Marcus Messiah Garvey, that it is ours to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can do it. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Amen. On this Platinum Jubilee, celebrating the latest 70 years in centuries of mental servitude to a bankrupt idea, let's change our own mental landscape. Let's stop fooling ourselves that the institution of monarchy is anything we can relate to, or that it might harbour some good in the form of steadfast duty and sacrifice. Instead, let's say no to the Kool-Aid and roundly reject it altogether.